welcome to Early Years Together. It's the podcast where research meets real-world practice. I'm Deborah Brown.
And I'm Dr. Jacqueline Young. We're both associate professors at the University of Sussex. Between us, we've spent decades teaching, learning and supporting educators in the early years.
Our goal is simple. We want to spark ideas, challenge assumptions and celebrate the incredible work happening in early childhood settings.
So each episode will explore evidence-based strategies, share insights from the field and connect theory with practice, all to support children and those who care for them.
If you find today's podcast valuable, please subscribe, share and leave a review so that others can join and listen as well.
So let's begin. What's today's focus, Deborah?
So this week we're talking about high quality interactions, and what we really want to find out is what that really means and why they matter.
So thinking about research by people like Mashburn et al. 2008, they talked about how high quality adult-child interactions are actually stronger factors influencing child development than things like classroom design and even the space that children are in a nursery, which is quite surprising. So Deborah, when we're talking about these interactions, what does high quality mean to you?
So within adult and child interactions, that high quality, attuned and present adult is really key. Someone who's at the children's level is really, really great, because that will really mean that the child knows that you have that genuine interest. You need to be responsive to the child's needs, and generally commenting on what's going on at any time really models language, but also shows that you're there and present with them.
I think body language is really important in that, Deborah, isn't it? So when you're taking that time to connect with a child, all those visual clues that lead to turn taking, your facial expression, the orientation of your body, and also taking the time and not rushing. Early years settings and the home environment can be really, really busy places. And those high quality interactions take time.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember that children need that time to process and think. So, you modelling high quality language, modelling that serve and return, so being responsive, but also remembering that sometimes we need to observe, wait, and really listen in to children and what's going on at that point.
Yeah, there's some great guidance and training material that we use on our course, and I know lots of setting use. It's called Every Child is a Talker. And in those materials, there's a really great activity that we've used with students, which is really just getting them to stop and think about 3 high quality interactions that they've had in the last 2 weeks, write down what happened, when it happened, and then begin to think and talk about with other practitioners, what the common threads are as to what led to that being such a high quality interaction. That really supports practitioners to think through, all the different elements that lead to that high quality to and fro. Of course, that's practitioners. And there are other types of guidance available for practitioners. So sustained shared thinking, Deborah, I don't know if you want to talk to us about that.
Yeah, no, I can talk about what sustained shared thinking is. Again, it's another one of those acronyms, isn't it? Sustained shared thinking, or SST. So it came from some work from Siraj Blatchford et al. In 2002. And they defined sustained shared thinking as 2 individuals working together to think through a concept or problem, but you're both contributing. And I think it's really important in early years to remember that that doesn't necessarily have to be the practitioner or the adult interacting with the child. That can also be children working together as well. So, obviously in practice, as early years educators, we need to be aware of some of those skills that can really encourage and support sustained shared thinking. Jacqueline, have you got any ideas?
Yeah, so it's things like tuning in, isn't it? How do we demonstrate that we're tuning in? So eye contact, as you've already said, getting down low, facial expressions, showing that real genuine interest in the things that they find interesting.
Yeah, I think it's that knowledge of the child, isn't it? And actually that means as well being aware of parents and, carers as well, and them sharing those interests with you and you being in tune with that.
Then we've got recapping, haven't we? So that might just be when something's happening or some events are taking place, and just verbalising what's happened so far. So recapping aloud things that have been happening around you.
Yeah, I think that idea of, you said that this is happening, those moments. I think as well, children build on the relationships and knowing a little bit about what's going on for you as well, and you offering your own experience,
Yeah. So things like, I remember when this happened to me on the way home yesterday, and I wonder if it's related or I did this yesterday, or I solved this problem this way once before. Also, that sort of clarifying ideas. So when a child's trying to verbalise something, so gently prompting them to explain, the reasons for them doing things like, so tell me what you're doing, or tell me what you think's happening.
I think it's important as well. We're modelling. So, suggesting ideas, you might like to try doing it this way. That doesn't mean that the child has to take it on, but it's you sharing your ideas at that point.
And connecting things to things that have happened before. So that reminding process. Do you remember when this happened yesterday? Can be something that is really positive, and always being encouraging. So allowing children to express their ideas, even if they're wrong, and then perhaps unpicking what their reason for that thinking is. And then if necessary, then offering alternative viewpoints. So, for example, I don't know, you're looking at snails and they're telling you it's slimy, that you give them the time to express that. You ask them why they think they're slimy or unpleasant or terrible, and then offering alternatives. I actually think they're rather pretty.
And I think a lot of this can be done in interactions involving stories as well. Speculating, how do you think this story is going to end? What do you think will happen if we do this? That's a really good way to get children to think about possible outcomes.
And I think that sort of leads into the idea of how important questions are. So thinking about the types of questions that you're asking and checking that you're using open-ended questions. So it's so easy to shut that to and fro down and that interaction with the child by asking questions that are just either yes, no, or one-word answers, but coming up with questions that really encourage that to and fro, and that interaction is really, really important.
And I think as well, having adults around young children that model their thinking. So being able to say, I'm going to use this. Say, for example, you're sticking something together. I'm going to use this glue because last time I tried using sellotape and it wasn't as effective. So, you can really build that in. Or with much younger children, even in care routines, you can talk about, the steps you need when you're doing things such as washing hands or wiping your nose. First of all, you need to go and get the tissue. Those types of things can, you're really modelling the thinking about what needs to happen.
And so far, we've really been talking about guidance that early years practitioners have perhaps traditionally been exposed to, but there are plenty of tips that work for parents at home as well. So, Deborah, what are your top tips for parents in terms of sustaining quality interactions?
Well, I think it's just really important to remember that, from birth, children naturally and babies naturally are comforted by voices. They're drawn to faces and drawn to, interacting and communication. That's the cry is the one way of communicating, but babies are comforted by voices. So even remembering at those, really early stages, singing, reading, interacting whilst care routines are happening, such as nappy changing, bath times, feeding, just all the time, hearing language and feeling communicated with is really key.
Yeah, care times really matter. And there are other really special times of the day, like that bedtime story when everything's quiet and you get that real calm opportunity to connect and reflect on the day. Then there are things like songs and nursery rhymes, which I know you've already mentioned, but as well as singing them together, sort of pausing and almost playing sort of playful games to and fro's, or allowing children to slot in a familiar word so that it becomes like a playful interaction and not just a one-way street.
And I think remembering as well that when, children will, where they're trying, to build language, sentences might get muddled. It's important to remember not to correct them, but to repeat back to a child how they, modelling how you would have said it as well. And I think it's really important in this age as well, where, we've got lots of interactions where screens may interfere in interactions as well, that actually we are really key in modelling those as well.
Yeah. And screens is a tricky one, isn't it? Because there are some interactions or some situations where screens can support children with their language. But I suppose the time that screens becomes more problematic is really if your attention is diverted from being with your child because you're focused on a screen. So I know one thing that practitioners talk a lot about is, pick up and drop off time when an adult then picks up a screen and is distracted from, that very important moment of being with their child. That happens with practitioners as well in the actual setting, sometimes when they're assessing. And I know it's something that we all talk about. And it comes back to being present.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I think that just that responsive, and just remembering that for young children, every opportunity, even those very early stages, babbling, pointing, speaking, that's essential, and that has meaning as well. So a child is communicating at that point.
So that's all for today's episode of Early Years Together. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending your time with us.
So if you enjoyed our conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review and share it with a friend or colleague who might enjoy it as well. So until next time, I'm Deborah Brown.
And I'm Dr. Jacqueline Young, and this has been the Early Years Together. Take care and keep up those quality interactions.